very lucky. We've got Miryam talking to us today. Miryam's a qualified CFO. She worked for a number of large corporates here in the UK and then 5 years ago moved to the UAE. And she now has a business providing consultancy and advice to companies that want to set up in the region. And she also does some portfolio CFO work. And today she's going to share some tips and things that need to be considered if your business is looking to set up in the GCC region. She's quite happy to take questions throughout. So if there's something that you want to discuss in more detail throughout the presentation, feel free to just raise your hand. And yeah, with that, I'll pass over to you, Miryam. Thank you.
And guys, if you guys already have questions specific, I appreciate that this presentation will be quite generic, but if you guys have any specific questions as we're going through this, please feel free to share at any point in time. So just to give you guys a little bit of a summary of what we're going to go through, why UK businesses are moving, exploring the region, what it's like setting up businesses in this region, how does business licenses work, what the fundraising opportunities and landscape has been within the arena, what the tax landscape is, and how does residency work, and how you can employ people in the legal. So we're going to just go through a couple of those kinds of things overall, okay? Just a bit about me, I think we've done. I moved to Dubai in 2018 to work on a retail transformation, saw a need for a portfolio interim CFOs at the startup of tech, because it was a startup of tech and fintech, started to grow really big. Growth startup investment had just started to become professionalized, and I started working with several companies in the region, whereas there's a lot of unknowns about setting up in this region, and hence this is just a bit of an information session, okay? The most recent economic forecast, the British Chamber is saying that the UK economy, and I'm sure this is something that all of you guys already know, will plunge into full recession before the end of 2023, with inflation spiking to a staggering 14%. The GCC, mainly UAE and Saudi, on the other hand, is witnessing a surge of market entry of new British businesses, and it's up 23% year on year. The UAE, the main things attracting people is stability in the low tax rates, the moving economy, and British investors are increasingly look at UAE to incorporate their businesses to hedge their risk with everything that's been happening in the UK. Just to kind of let you know, 2023 is likely to be the record year for cross-border mergers and acquisitions. So there are a lot of UK, European, and even US companies looking to buy businesses in the MENA region. And when I talk about MENA, it's GCC, North Africa, and Africa. Alongside South America, people are saying that that's the next big area for growth. Okay, 14% of the revenue generated by FTSE listed companies compared to 13%. Back in 2019. Right now, it's sitting at 24%. I don't know if many of you know that JD Sports has just bought a string of gyms called Gym Nation in this area, so to grow so that they can grow internationally through MENA and Southeast Asia. The number of FTSE listed companies with operations in MENA has increased from 22 to 30 between 2018 and 2020, and it continues to grow post-COVID. Why that's happening, the GCC realized that they had been relying on oil and that they wanted to move away, and with a lot of fresh new talent, they want to invest quite heavily in aerospace, healthcare, and infrastructure market. And with the growth of their new younger population, they've effectively been growing and significantly increasing the number of what you call SaaS, technology-specific and fintech regulatory sandbox. Both private PE houses and the government are investing money heavily in these sectors to bring tech companies and fintech companies into the region. Okay. So that's been the main reason for it. What's the main ease of business setup, variety of business type? I think a lot of people who don't know this area, and I was very surprised to realize it's a very stable economy. The UAE and Saudi currency is pegged to the US dollar and has been consistent. It's made great technological advancements. If you think Saudi by 2030 has decided to increase the whole, just in travel and tourism, by that, whereas the rest of the world is seeing retraction. Every industry is showing a 30 to 50% increase in business within the location. And now what they've able to do is, whereas before you needed local sponsors on certain things, you're now able to repatriate 100% of your capital and your profits back, and there's no income tax, and that's still the case. Okay. Why UK corporates are now talking about operating for the UAE after post-COVID. The biggest thing is that it's actually now it's central, both into the Southeast Asia market and back into Africa. And they're finding, as business grow globally, the workforce and the talent that's now growing, especially in terms of tech, it's a great hub to be in. Okay. So the one thing that confuses people is basically ownership structures. Okay, so the way that UAE is based is that it doesn't have companies; it has licenses, and it has licenses in what they call free zone entities and non-free zone entities. Non-free zone entities are businesses where you're based in mainland Dubai and you're selling directly into it. You can some of the businesses you have to have a UAE partner, but however, the free zone entities which allow you to sell, it can be 100% owned. You can access the local market. There's no customs, and you're free to source labor outside the antiquated systems. Free zones such as DIFC, which is the financial market, AGGM, which is the Abu Dhabi general market, is the market, and Saudi Stock Exchange is, they want to grow that business and they are inviting companies into the region. Okay. So basically the setups are pretty similar, even though they talk about licenses. You can have a free zone entity, which is just a free zone limited liability company, a non-free zone entity, which is either an individual establishment like a self-employed, and then a limited liability company, or you can have branches. The structure is pretty straightforward, but what you're doing is you're buying licenses. Okay. The license types have increased significantly. Before, it was a question of what kind of licenses. So they have sort of general trade licenses that allow you to do commercial, educational, e-commerce, general trading, industrial, media, professional. And what's really good with these types of licenses, depending on your license, there is, and what you're doing and how you're growing, there is funding and also innovator companies that look specifically for the license type to understand what kind of business they want to invest in. Okay. There's still regulated industries, so medical and clinical, educational, banking, real estate, transportation, recruitment is still regulated. So when we talk about regulated, let's say, for example, if you wanted to come and set up if Uber wanted to set up, they would have to be signed off by RTA. If you are going to do banking, it has to be signed off by the DIFC, which is a financial institution, and also the central bank, and you need a special type of license, that needs to be regulated. So, and that's that depending on what kind of business you're doing. In these industries, also the people you're employing also have to have certain types of qualifications. So, for example, if you're doing medical, so say Botox, or you're doing education, which is vocational training, anything you're doing, the people training, Dubai has their standard of what they expect those people to be educated by and what sort of experience, what local qualification. That they've become extremely sophisticated in what they're doing. Before it wasn't like this. Now they have very clear rules and regulations to protect both the business so that people can't copy, and also the people using the services. Fundraising opportunities. So one of the things that has been very interesting in the region for people to know is for local startups. Within effectively 3 years, there is now within the region over 1,000 accelerators and incubator startup businesses. Okay. Who basically are looking for the next unicorn that they want to invest in. It has grown rapidly, both here in the UAE and also in Dubai. And they look at two things. They look at businesses that don't exist within the region, and the business technology that can be grown globally. And they have programs. It's very structured. You can apply. They go through their criteria. It's very easy now to reach this. The one area that is still struggling. So, and then on the other side, they've got big VCs that write the bigger checks, the 25 to 30, 40 million. The area in the region which is still struggling is people trying to raise what I call the $1 million to $5 million, which is a pre-series A funding. But recently, startup, interesting business concepts, there's been a huge government incentive and local investors that have professionalized themselves into that sort of funding structure. Tax landscape. Okay, so taxation, most people think of the region as being it's taxation friendly. It's not taxation free. UAE has VAT of 5%. Corporate income tax is to be introduced next year on mainland only profits of 9%. VAT is 15%, and corporate tax is 20% for non-Saudis. And there's no tax on both places, and there's no income tax. So basically, what you earn is what you take home. And that's the simplicity of the taxation structure within the GCC. Okay. So that's it. So I thought I'd share a bit of information. I know you guys have been really, really quiet, and I'm sure potentially some of you will have very specific questions. I'm happy to take questions, or if you have any information, if you'd like any information with reference to the region, any questions, please, and even if it's nothing to do with what's on here, please feel free to share.
Thanks, Miryam. That was really informative. So, you know, when you're talking about the incubator funds, yeah, if you've got an established business in the UK and you wanted to start out in the region, would you get like any kind of grant funding or no?
So no, it doesn't work in grant funding. It's all private. It is all private funding. However, if effectively the way it would work here, so let's say, for example, you came up with a tech SaaS business and you are set up in this region, you can apply for funding from these accelerator incubator businesses. Okay. There are also accelerator incubator businesses in Europe who specifically look at businesses that are geographically hitting the GCC and the African region. People have started that that's the region where especially technology is extremely lacking. So for example, I provide advisory for a Google Analytics retail SaaS tech business, okay? And they have, and it's AI based. It has similarities to some technology within UK and Europe, but it's extremely different. But what the investors love about it is that it's GCC and Africa centric, and the owners managed to grow the business and the data and the monetization that will come from an area most businesses in the US and UK have found difficult to penetrate, if that makes sense. And then another, so we had basically two European owners who set up a business, which is a marketplace for placing agents for bookings. They moved to this region, and basically they decided to set up in this region, start with the UAE, Saudi Arabia. They've now got offices in the UK and in the US, but because they were based here and they started here, they were able to raise over $1 million. So they are looking in this region. There's two things. Number one, there's two ways of looking at funding. There's about setting up businesses here, concentrating on adding to the economy and the growth of the economy and tech that doesn't exist in this region, and there's funding available for that. But there's also, they've made it very easy for businesses that are based in the UK and Europe or the States, and if they wish to move here, and they're more global businesses. So obviously it's not about moving a UK business that is earning money in the UK. So I had a client who came to me and says, hey, I have an amazing e-com site. I'm thinking of growing internationally. Okay. So what should I do? And he's like, I'd love to live in the UAE. So he kept his UK e-commerce website, catering his UK market in the UK, and then set up a new website here in the UAE that deals with the global market. And it was easy for him to reach the GCC, Southeast Asia, and also even the American market. And there's more tax benefits associated. Tax planning became easier for him. So he still got his UK business, but he set up his global business in the UAE, in this region, so that he can he can take advantage of a more globalized logistics structure, as well as a more globalized someone with more globalized resources, if that makes sense. And plus he loved the idea of the sun as well, so that also helped.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to share?
Shall I go?
Hey.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Richard Beeston. I'm interested in learning more about Saudi and setting up an entity in Saudi Arabia to do business there, and potentially employing local staff and understanding more about the Saudization rules.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. So tell me, so first of all, setting up a company in Saudi as a foreign owner, you can do that. That's quite straightforward. I actually helped a Jordanian owner who works in recruitment set up a company there. With reference to sort of Saudization, depending on what you're doing and depending on the size of your business, it is what impacts whether you need locals, if that makes sense. So there is a massive push towards localization. So for example, schools have been told that at least 50% of your teachers now need to be Saudis. But what's really interesting is that the younger generation of Saudis coming out of university have all studied abroad and are coming with a very different view into the market. So the labor market is very rich with resources. So mixing expats with locals is great. Depending on the size of the business, there are ways around sort of localization. So I'll give you a perfect example, and this does not leave the room. There is a government entity actually who has to employ 100% Saudis. They use an employee of records company outside to hire all their consultants and then declare they're 100% locals. So there are, based depending on your specific setup, there's ways it could work, but it would depend exactly on what your business did, what you wanted it to do, the size of the business, and their solutions depending upon all of those criteria, if that makes sense. But once you understand it, it's not that difficult to maneuver through, if that makes sense.
Right, and what are the sort of the costs involved in setting up? I mean, we're a relatively small business and working with the Saudi government, so I'm not sure we can skip around too easily.
So it depends. So first of all, if I was going to do that, I always say to people, do you have to be first set up in Saudi? And is there a way of actually doing business? And that's one thing we'd review. The second thing is Saudi recently has introduced the department called MISC, which is the Ministry of Foreign Investments, whose main aim is to make it easier for small businesses to set up. That never existed before. Okay, the big costs of $100,000 or so to set up a company, which was the numbers that people used to throw around in the old days, are gone. It is a cost, but it's a reasonable cost, if that makes sense.
Okay, so can you set up, say, in Dubai or Abu Dhabi and effectively address the Saudization rules from there by employing people, I guess, Saudis in the UAE?
So to give you, Saudi's not in the UAE, it's separate. Depending on your size, I think a lot of small businesses do that. However, if you're a big company, like, so for example, PwC and EY got into trouble because what they were doing were employing all their staff in the UAE and then sending them over and not employing them as their issue wasn't the fact that they were expats, it was the fact that the employees weren't protected by Saudi employment law. Does that sort of make sense? So they were taking advantage. It wasn't the fact that they were sending people over. Saudi actually has a bit of a more structured, it has national insurance, if that makes sense, and it likes to protect people employed. So the EYs and the PwCs got into trouble, but because they were effectively hiring consultants, sending them into Saudi, and the Saudi government said, but they are employees and they should be protected as employees, and told them off and told them to start employing people locally, if that makes sense. But that was the reason for it. It wasn't the question of sending people over.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss it offline, specific with reference to do that. The first thing I always talk to people about is, first of all, what do you want to do? Do you need an establishment there, or do you just need to be in the region? And then secondly, if you do need one, it has become easier for startups to set up businesses. Okay, now it'd be good to get your details. I'm not sure if they're on here, are they? Or but yeah, they're on the deck.
Are they?
We're going to share the slides after the session. So Miryam's details are all on there. So
great. Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions or comments?
So I'm going to ask a question. How many of you guys work with companies who have businesses and presence in the GCC in Africa?
Yeah, I work for an American company, and we sell. My role is finance across the EMEA region. So we sell into a lot of countries in the Middle East, in particular, Saudi and Oman, Iraq, Iran, all of the Middle East really. But we tend to use distributors over there. So we sell to the distributors, and then they sell on to the ultimate. We sell medical products. So they sell then on to the hospitals.
So effectively they do. So it's simpler for you guys to do that than go through and set themselves up medically and all the rules and regulations. Have you ever considered in certain regions whether it would make sense for you guys to set up on your own, or is that something you're not at a size yet enough to do that?
At the moment, no, we're not at a size. So what we've done in the past, as far as our business model, is going to certain countries, start off with a distributor, and then when we get to a certain level, it's then we have a negotiation that we go direct. So we'll set up our own sales force. So at the moment, because of the whole of the Middle East, there's quite a lot of challenges, particularly the market access for getting our products paid for.
Yeah.
Basically,
and import and try, and then what code do you use, and what's medical, and how do you get it to the door, and all the rest of it.
Well, there is a potential that once we get to a certain size, then we might go direct in certain countries. So then we'd have to look at the whole of the region, whether we set up a company in a particular country and do it. So we need to look at it at that particular point. But at the moment, the relationship we've got with our distributors is very good. And it works for us at the moment. But probably in 3 or 4 years' time, then that might change, because we've got some more products coming through as well.
My advice while you've got these distributors on board is start understanding because you're in what I would call a licensed market. You're right. Trust me, I work with a company who's in medical, and down to what the code is matters, because Yeah, because then you know whether it's going to get stuck in port for 5 weeks. It's not even about the duty and customs; it's about the time to get the product. So yeah, I can see from your face the problem.
We have challenges with that as well. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the pieces to do is start doing your homework, start getting to know the local authorities to understand what annoys them and doesn't annoy them. You want to do that before you get big, so that when you're ready, you've got a very decent understanding of the regulatory framework. So you're already thinking about the issues and problems. Like, for example, I'll give you something. One of my clients does something very simple called electrolysis. And it took them, the difference between a needle versus a probe. It took us ages to explain to somebody. But it matters because a probe's not regulated, whereas a needle is. So those are one of those things that use this time to effectively gather that information. Does that make sense? Rather than wait to do that, because the distributors will make it feel like it's something you can't work out, because it's in their best interest to do that, and that's how they do it. And you know what, if they're earning you lots of money, why do you want to move away from a distributor? But don't let the reason be the fear of the unknown. The rules are very clear. You might not like them, but they are very, very clean and clear and easy to follow. Most of the time when I've looked at it, it's people don't like them. Like I just had a conversation with a clinic when they found out that you had to, if you're not from a European country, you need a degree to become a beauty therapist. And I'm like, I kind of understand that. So it's good to understand it rather than, but a lot of distributors try and scare people away from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. We've got a question from, is it Isla? Isel? Sorry, I know I've completely mispronounced your name.
No, it's fine. It's Ilsa. Hi. So we're currently in the process of getting set up there, and I'm quite interested in, Miryam, you were raising right from the beginning in terms of the repatriation of your profits and that. Do you see there being any potential issues? Because obviously the tax rate's slightly different to what we've got in the UK.
Yeah.
And that will carry with it implications. But in terms of the actual process of repatriating profits, how have you found that?
It's pretty simple. Where it's if you're sort of set up and you're set up in a free zone aspect of it. Once you've covered the tax aspect of that country, like I said, it's not zero tax anymore. Sending the money back is absolutely fine. It's fine to do that. Saudi is a little bit different to the UAE. There's no withholding tax in the UAE, whereas there is in Saudi. So it depends on your structure that you set up. So it's about understanding the intrinsities between each of the countries in the region and how you maximize that. So I actually have Saudi clients who only deal with the Saudi market through Saudi, and they deal with the rest of the world through the UAE because it's more straightforward. They don't have to worry about withholding tax, because that's the biggest issue with reference to dividends and repatriation. Are you looking at a free zone or a mainland setup, and what part of this world are you looking at?
Well, we've actually set up in Saudi, in Riyadh itself.
Awesome.
We're already there.
Awesome. Yeah. I was there last week. They had the Leap, which is started since the tech. So I go to Riyadh every couple of weeks. So yeah. Have you been?
Oh, we're going. Our MD is heading up there next week to finish the signatory.
Okay. Let me, I most probably know, depending on after this, if you want to let me know who set up your company. I know a lot of the company setup people, and if you want to have a conversation with reference to what to expect when you arrive there, give me a shout. It feels very daunting because you have to go over to sign, and you need to get, I'm assuming you're going to get the company handed over to you, set up the bank account, become a signatory, then you're going to set up the GoC file to be able to employ people. Someone's going to run you around and speak in lots of different languages and take you to these places and then say just sign.
Yes.
if you want, I'm sure that's how it's been explained to you. If you want to pick up the phone before you go and have a conversation and let me know, I'm more than happy to do that, because I'm sure that is how it's 100% been explained to you. Or
yes, the next 10 days. That's what's going to be happening.
And you're going to get a medical done, and
Yeah.
I understand that. So if you want to speak to somebody, please, if you want to ask me what it's like, give me a shout. I'll also tell you some of the best restaurants to go to.
Okay, great, thanks.
Perfect, brilliant. Has anybody else got anything else before we wrap up? I feel like it's, Richard, have you got another question? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, another supplementary question, if that's all right. So currently we invoice into 3 different clients in Saudi, and one of the interesting things is 2 don't have any withholding tax when they pay us, and 1 does. Okay, and I'm not looking to have withholding tax deducted, so I don't mention it to the 2 that don't, but the 1 that does, I didn't quite manage to get to the bottom of why that was the case.
Okay, so legally they are meant to depend on how much are they doing? Are you in the
5%?
Okay. Yeah. Legally they're meant to charge, so because there's no VAT, they are meant to charge withholding tax. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect reason. So I have clients in Saudi, I'm based in Dubai, they're meant to charge me 5%. I basically tell them to add 5% before they pay me. The finance teams are not that sophisticated, so the ones that aren't doing it most probably have people who don't even know that they're meant to be doing withholding tax and haven't applied. So I wouldn't bring it up. It's their responsibility to do that. The one that's charging you, I would just make sure you tell them you want it in the price rather than X, because that's what I do that with my clients. I'm saying, if you're deducting withholding tax, please add 5% and pay it over. Don't take it from my charge.
Right. Okay.
But then I'm just cruel.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No problem. That's why most people go through the UAE so Saudi companies have companies in Dubai because there are certain things where it's not 5% withholding tax, it can go up to 15 to 20%. It's about how you declare your service. So people try and keep it at the lowest rate, which is 5%.
Right. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Miryam. It's been really informative. Appreciate you taking the time out to prepare the presentation, deliver it, and have the chat afterwards.
I love talking about it.
Oh, thank you. So actually, as I said, we're going to be sharing the PowerPoint presentation. So your details are on there. If anyone wants to make contact directly, they can. And yeah, I guess that's the only thing to mention. I don't know whether you're on Guild, aren't you, Miryam? Yeah.
Yes, I am. Best place to get hold of me is on my email, but I try and keep up with the Guild as well. But if anybody wants to get hold of me, do shout.
Okay, so for anyone who's not a member of Guild, it's we've got a group on there called the FD and CFO Network, and it's basically a platform. The Guild is the app, and you can ask questions, share insight, speak to people directly. We've got about 890 members now, so there'll be details on the email after the follow-up as well. So if you're not a member, do feel free to join. So yeah, with that, I think we can wrap up. Thanks, Miryam.
No, thank you guys, and thank you
you
for asking questions. I get very nervous when I do stuff like this, but it's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you.